Um, yeah, so thanks everyone for joining us. Like I said, we're gonna talk today basically about kind of three steps to paying for the semester, paying for school. And then I have Nick here from Juno to tell us kind of an opportunity they have that they come up with to help people save time, save money, more importantly, right, on student loans if you need them. So I'll start off, just let me give a little backstory. It won't be too long of just, who I am and StudentFi, how we started. So a few years ago, I had just interned as a financial advisor, and my best friend Jordan was actually working on Wall Street in an investment bank. So, things were going well. But then one day he called me and he was like, "Hey, my student loans just went into repayment. Like, what do I do? Like, how do I handle it?" And I was like, honestly, I really didn't know. And so it was tough. But then, it was like whatever. And a few weeks later, though, we had another friend come to us, and she'd actually missed her first payment, and they were calling her and all this drama. And again, we just didn't really know how to help. And of course, we have the external desire, want to help her, save money, kind of show that we know things about finance. But on the inside, it was kind of scary, and I was a little, I guess, embarrassed or insecure, I guess, about the fact that there are these big financial questions around college that a lot of us just don't know. And so it was tough, but that's when everything started to change, right? Because we started to think about, we could actually use resources to educate and empower ourselves to understand, paying for college, all these types of questions, then actually, help other people with that. So we, created this free platform, StudentFi.org, that has content, tools, and advice to help you pay for school, no matter where you're at in that process, right? From college planning through repayment. Parents, a lot of parents out there, I know, I talk to my parents, and it's tough to manage all that. So yeah, I'm pleased to say we've welcomed thousands of visitors to our site on several $100,000 worth of business, and so yeah, it's great to be here. And Nick, I'll let you kind of share a little bit about Juno's story.
Sure. So my background is pretty unique. I actually used to run business development for North America for the Princeton Review, primarily assisting undergrads and grads on getting into schools and universities. While I was there, quickly realized that diversity, access, inclusion, affordability, all red flags. So I'd actually given a presentation at Harvard Business School. We're based out of Boston. And more or less, that's where I met the co-founders of my current organization at Juno. And essentially what we are at Juno, we're an independent third party, sits on top of every major national lending agency to ensure that anybody looking to take out either A, a new student loan, or B, refinance their existing loans are getting the lowest interest rates possible. So we'll do this by way of a collective bargaining agreement, and we'll gather people all over the globe, put them in these different tranches and buckets, and then ultimately present our case to top lenders. And it's at that point in time that these lending organizations, banks, will compete to win a cohort of students. All they'll have to do is slash their interest rates, negotiate some of the underwriting criteria, and then they'll win instead of spending hundreds of millions of dollars in some instances per customer acquisition. So it's been pretty successful. On top of that, we're a free resource, no obligation to take out a new student loan or refinance. Primary goal is to ensure that people are not subjected to these predatory interest rates that have been a thing for generations now. I wish it was just people 0 to 5 years outside of graduation, but it's really expanded since then. So typically people are coming to us anywhere from 0 to 25 years outside of their graduation date, still struggling with student loan debt. So that's a little bit about us and our story as well. And thanks, Jackson, for having me today.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. So let me just share my screen real quick. We're not going to do like a full PowerPoint here, but I just want to, as I talk about, again, I always emphasize, probably saw on our website, the kind of 3-step system to paying for the semester, paying for school. I thought it'd be nice to just have a slide there to follow along. So I'm a visual learner. So right, that's what today, 3-step approach, and how Nick and his team use this group discounting. It's pretty interesting. But before we even get into that, hopefully you don't even need a student loan, right? And that's what I say. This 3 steps. Number 1 is always to look at free money. And so what that means are going to be things like scholarships and grants. And so, a lot of people don't understand the difference there, and it's pretty simple. All it is are grants tend to be needs based on your financial situation. Scholarships are usually more performance based, maybe academic, of course, athletic. Um, you know, kind of, I guess, how do you go about getting them? Well, there's a couple ways, right? So I think, the most common is there are a lot of scholarship databases out there, right? If you just Google it, I know Juno as well. They have a scholarship database. So those databases are going to be, really crucial for, you parents or your son or daughter, because basically just gives access to, millions of scholarships out there that you wouldn't have come across otherwise. Another way, if you're already kind of in school or in college, reach out to your university or check. Most universities have like their student profile. I know on mine, my Bama, you go in and you can see like current scholarship opportunities. You can also contact like your student success office, financial aid office, admissions office, those types of folks. Again, to access those scholarship and grant opportunities that you may not have known about. So, like I said, why is that number one? Well, it's free money, right? Scholarships, grants, you don't have to pay it back. That's always what we want to spend probably, several hours researching into that when we're thinking about paying for the semester, before doing anything else. The second option, right, is going to be federal money. And so that's going to be basically, like your FAFSA, right? So that's the free application for federal student aid. That's what that stands for. And the reason that we put this number 2 is because typically, and probably 95% of the time, you'll get a better interest rate on a federal loan, and they also have a lot more borrower benefits than your typical private lender. So these are things like, depending on your career, maybe if you work for a nonprofit or certain types of jobs, you can actually get your student loans forgiven. I know now Biden's talking about this forgiving $10,000 worth. Will it happen? Hopefully. Don't know, but again, that's going to be why you want federal. And something that a lot of people don't know is that, again, focusing on this spring semester, if things have changed at all in your kind of financial situation, you can actually reapply for FAFSA right now. So if you go to studentaid.gov, again, take advantage of that and see, maybe you'll get some additional financial aid coverage, things like that. And so that brings us to, our third option, which is basically going to be the private money, right? So that's any kind of sort of private company, all right? Traditionally a student loan. There are a couple other kind of alternatives such as income share agreements, which we won't get too far into that, right? But basically, that's just going to be a loan you get from a private company. And so down there, the basics of that, the key things to keep in mind are going to be the interest rate. Interest rate's essentially, it's essentially the price you pay to borrow the money, right? We probably all know that. You can be on the duration, the principal amount, and kind of the repayment terms, things like that. Some lenders offer grace periods, some offer, some sort of discounts for enrolling in auto pay, things like that. Those key kind of terms are what come together to actually ultimately determine your monthly payment and how much you pay. Common question I get asked is, well, how do I know if I need a loan, or what's the amount of the loan? So basically, you want to take your cost, right? The cost of attendance for the semester, or you can do it for the year, whatever way. Subtract your EFC. So that number means your expected family contribution. That's going to come from the FAFSA, your financial aid award letter, right? They'll basically say, based on the information you entered, this is what we expect your family to contribute to the student's education. Right. So that can give you an idea of how much you'll be contributing. And then, of course, you can subtract out that financial aid award, right, that you got. And then that amount left is usually the amount that you're going to need to finance. So, again, those are kind of the basics. And then ultimately, like I said, how can you save money? Well, it's really by lowering your rate. And that's where I'll let, Nick kind of talk a little bit about what Juno does, because we think it's a very interesting opportunity, and that's really why we partnered with them, quite frankly.
Yeah, of course. And, this is great. The free money, obviously, we'd all love to be fully paid athletes at a particular university, going on full scholarship. unfortunately, that's not going to be the case for most people. So obviously scholarships, grants, any way that you can get access to that, make sure that you're doing the due diligence ahead of time. As Jackson alluded to earlier, we do have a full scholarship database that's eligible for everybody to partake in. So take advantage of those, whether you win one or you win 20 of them. It could be the difference between having to take out a student loan, which would ultimately be the last resort. Something with these steps as well, you're going to want to take a look at which perspective you're going to be coming from. Is it the undergraduate perspective? Is it the graduate school perspective? So on and so forth. First and foremost, people will borrow federal student loans in the undergraduate perspective, and then ultimately they'll hit their federal cap, and then that's when they're left with the gap to make the decision, should I borrow something that's called like a Parent Plus loan, for example. Most people will borrow the Parent Plus loan without actually realizing that they're only doing it because it has the word parent associated with it. Typically, that will have higher interest rates in some instances than other places like a private student loan lending option would ultimately have. So really do your due diligence ahead of time. Previously, the federal government was around 7% interest rates on their federal student loans. So take a look, because there are certainly going to be lower options, whether it's a regional bank, whether it's through Juno, whether it's through other lending options out there. You're going to want to take a closer look at that. And then privatized student loans obviously don't have the same federal protection as federal student loans ultimately would. So I know it's a little bit more to think about, but if you die and you have a federal student loan, it's forgiven. Whereas a private student loan, they're still going to be expected to pay that back in full. So when you're costing, another big thing that I wanted to point out here before we kind of get over to the next slide is the cost overall associated with your potential program that you're going to be going to. If you're going to be going to, I'll use in our backyard here, Harvard University, and going through the entire process, they're going to give you a sticker price, but then you're going to have all the calculations in there beyond what your EFC is going to be, what financial aid award packages you're ultimately going to be getting. Are you getting any sort of grant scholarships? There's going to be books, cost of living expenses that are kind of factored into that decision as well. Are they going to be living on campus, off campus? So you want to make sure that you're seeing the total picture in all aspects rather than just a sticker price that's advertised on their particular website. More often than not, it's going to be lower than what you'd expect from some of these universities, although it's not really low when you're seeing $60,000, $70,000 a year for tuition. And then ultimately, they're going to tack on things like room and board, things of that nature. So really pay close attention to all that. Saving money by going with a lower interest rate is crucial over the life of somebody's loan. Typically, people were coming out of school and having interest rates anywhere from like 5% to 10, 11, 12, sometimes even percent interest rates. Really pay attention to that and some of the underwriting criteria and what your financial situation is ultimately going to look like, because you don't have to hold yourself moving on in life. The recent graduate, you're coming out of school, you're all excited, you're going to take a job that's paying you $50,000 a year, for example, but you have $150,000 in student loan debt at a 10% interest rate. You're not going to be able to afford to move out of mom and dad's apartment just quite yet. So you're really going to want to pay very close attention to some of these interest rates. Lowering your interest rates could happen from a multitude of different perspectives. Having a co-signer with fantastic credit, and that's federal privatized student loans. That's always going to be crucial through the entire process, especially for the undergraduate perspective. If you're going to be going from the graduate school perspective, again, having a fantastic credit, co-signers can always improve your rates as well. So getting a lower interest rates means a lower monthly payment over the life of the loan. And then dependent on your financial situation, of course, as Jackson mentioned earlier, you can be as aggressive or as in the long haul, as we call it, in this as possible. So you can say, you know what, I want to pay off my student loans in 5 years. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z to make this happen. I'm okay with moving back home for a few years to pay these all off and then moving out on my own. And then some people will say, you know what, I'm in this for the long haul. I think I'm going to be a high net worth earner over the course of 10, 15, 20 years. So I'm okay with having lower monthly payments over a long span of time. So really try to calculate ultimately where that's going to lie ultimately in your kind of background. And that'll actually set you forward in the right direction for your financial future. So
Awesome. Cool. Um, Nick, why don't you just again, quick, if you want quickly, just share a bit about kind of why, how Juno can help people save money, how you guys lower that interest rate, and then, just a couple of minutes, and then we'll get everyone going, can do some Q&A and wrap up.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds great. So again, I work for Juno. We're a completely free resource, no obligations. We basically buy in bulk with student loans, similar to like how Costco or Groupon works. We negotiate for a large cohort of students in all different demographic regions, all different parts of the country, all different majors, everything along those lines, ultimately in hopes of getting people the lowest or lower interest rates than they would be able to achieve anywhere else on the marketplace. So typically, if you're a one-off individual, some of these lending organizations can actually dictate what you would be paying in terms of your interest rate. You could be paying a significantly higher rate, regardless of your credit score, regardless of your program that you're entering, university, things of that nature. By coming in with a cohort here with us at Juno, you're coming in with a cohort of thousands of students that we run this competitive auction process every single year for. So for example, I always like to use myself as an example. I'm refinancing my student loans. I'm an MBA graduate, looking to take the next steps in the process. I'm coming in, I live in Boston, Massachusetts. I'm going to ultimately be coming in this cohort of MBA graduates looking to refinance their student loans in a US coastal city. And I'd be going with a particular partner that can get me lower interest rates than I'd be able to find anywhere else on myself. So it's the whole concept of strength in numbers. And that's ultimately what we do. So instead of these lending organizations or banks or credit unions out there in the world, instead of spending hundreds of millions of dollars in hopes to win or in hopes to have customer acquisition at that type of level, naming rights to stadiums, mailing flyers every single week in the mail, they could actually just slash their interest rates, negotiate the underwriting criteria for us, and win a cohort of 5, 10, 15,000 students each and every year. It's ultimately these banks and credit unions are going to have a certain cohort that they're going to want to be really aggressive with. Some really prefer Dr. Focus. Others say any graduate in particular, anybody taking out a new student loan in particular. And then others will want to get more granular and want to have a closer relationship with somebody that's going to be borrowing or refinancing through that process. So a couple things to make sure that you're all situated in the right direction. New student loans, if you're the undergraduate perspective, have a cosigner on those. It's very difficult to get approved if you do not have a cosigner, very similar to how the Parent Plus loan works. More often than not, you'll actually get a lower interest rate going through Juno. So for example, you get a full point APR % reduction right now just by going through Juno. Again, completely free resource, no obligations. We don't collect any personal information for you. And then ultimately, depending on what your situation may look like, is when you're going to be going through that process, and we'll actually update you automatically. In terms of the graduate students that are going to be going through this process as well, it's a little bit more open, I guess you can call it. Some parents say, hey, the first 4 are on us, the next 5 in medical school are on you. And that's when students will make that decision ultimately. Am I going to be borrowing from a privatized student loan lender? Am I going to try to get a TA position? So on and so forth. So those are the few things to really pay attention to. Lower interest rates will save you a significant amount of money over the life of your loan. And it doesn't hinder you from making decisions like purchasing a home, purchasing a car, starting a family, so things in that kind of capacity. So really pay attention to that. That's kind of our shtick at Juno. We're trying to help as many people as possible. We've been pretty successful over the past 3 years in that kind of cohort. So the more work that we can do, the better.
Great. Thanks for sharing that, Nick. So I want to just stop here and I exited just in case anyone online has any questions. Again, you can, just type it in the chat or just unmute and share. I always tell people, typical financial advisor is going to be CPA, a few $100, maybe $150 an hour. College admissions coach, probably $60 to $90 an hour. So please take advantage right, of having a time here to ask questions, anything, we'd be happy to answer, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, and even if you're not comfortable asking questions now, feel free to send us both a note. I can give my information out certainly at any point in time. Happy to chat through individual situations, interests, whatever that may be as well. So feel free. I guess we can kind of go over some common questions too, if there are no questions on this particular institution.
Well, I do have a question.
Sure.
Is getting an application through Juno, is it like just filling out an application through another means? It's an application that you fill out what you're asking for loan for, what school you're going to, what your study is, that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So you go to our website. It actually takes a minute to fill out a profile in full. We ask you what we call the 30,000 foot view questions. We'll get some nitty gritty information from you, and then we'll actually direct you with a particular lender that we think you would be most suitable for. So again, for example, undergraduate, you'd be going with one particular lender, whereas if you're going to be refinancing, you can go with a potential different couple of cohorts dependent on your background, if you have information in that kind of capacity.
And so all the profiles and everything you're filling out is filling out for the student. So I am the mother of the student.
Yep.
And everything is being done in her name, my daughter's name. Okay.
Yeah, you could absolutely do it in that kind of capacity, and that's not a problem whatsoever. Or you can do it in your own name and just say that it's for my daughter for her schooling education.
Got it. And on your website, you mentioned earlier that you would have scholarships on the website. Is that only national scholarships, or are they broken down by states or by areas of study? Because I'm reading through scholarships over and over and over. And please, Sharonda, don't take this the wrong way, but part of me says, are there any scholarships for white kids? Because everything out there seems to be focused on minorities. And I'm kind of stuck. I mean, I don't have any money either,
Yeah, of course. So scholarships are readily available. We do have a scholarship component on our website. We also have our monthly scholarship that we give away, $1,000 to a student. We've been doing that since the beginning of time. What we found was a lot of students that are applying out there, they're either trying to find existing scholarships where 10,000 people are applying to every single bit of scholarship, or they just simply don't apply. So we scoured the internet. We got rid of any broken link that was on there, and we found a large cohort of undergraduate scholarships that will be readily available actually by the end of the week, hopefully on our site as well, that you can take advantage of and apply full. Some of them are going to be national scholarships. Some of them are going to be regional. Some will even be down to the state basis. Some will have essays. Some will not have essays. So it's really doing the due diligence and kind of put in your mind to every sort of fragment about it, rather than just trying to apply for a bunch of no essay scholarships, because those are the easy people are going to try and do. So whether you win one of them or whether you win 20 of them, we've heard both instances. It's a really good practice to get into the habit too, especially if graduate school's on the horizon as well.
Okay.
Lori, any other questions about the undergraduate process? How have you found it so far, just out of curiosity?
Well, so every time we seem to fill out a form online, it feels like it puts you into a database, and then like everything else, you get inundated with all kinds of information, but not all of it's what you want.
Yeah.
So I think there's a scholarship.org or a .com site that we may have started with, and it's just challenging to find out which direction to go, and then to understand you're looking at a piece of paper, and that comes in from the school that says, okay, it's going to cost you X to go to our school, minus the federal money that may have come in, minus the scholarship that we're going to give you. It all seems to come out to be the same, no matter how expensive that school was that you chose, and the scholarship they gave you, which all varied. The bottom line is 16,000 is the winning number. I mean, we're talking various different schools, various different scholarships. They're presidential scholarships based on your grade point average. And in the end, whether the school started at 60,000 or it started at 30,000, they still want you to spend 16 in the end. I mean, that was just like this winning number.
Yeah, it's a difficult process to go through, and there's a lot of information to sift through. More or less, I don't know if you knew this already or if you've already done it, but you can actually appeal all of your financial aid award letters. I wouldn't recommend it if you're trying to go and apply for 10, 15 schools and writing financial aid appeal award letters to those institutions. But I did that with my undergraduate. I did that with my MBA program. I actually wrote a letter saying, hey, this is the number that I had in mind. This is particularly what I'm going to be seeking moving forward through the entire process. And they're always going to consider it. Worst they can do is say no. And then you can begin to think about other things that you can potentially negotiate to save you or to have some sort of cost savings throughout that entire process.
Right. Is that letter going back to the admissions director?
Admissions director, financial aid departments. It really depends on the particular university. Obviously, you're not going to get in touch with the president of Harvard, but
right.
with the admissions department or somebody in the enrollment offices, financial aid departments, they're willing to take a look at these letters and direct you in the right direction. So if you have a particular number in mind that speaks to you, for example, when I was going through the process, another 5K was going to make the decision for me for my MBA program. So I wrote through the few MBA programs that I ultimately got into and said, hey, got into XY institution, Z institution, and B institution. Here's what I'm looking for. Here's where their comparable packages. Another 5,000 would get me in the right direction. Ultimately, wound up working my benefit. I was able to acquire another $2,500, and I got a work study that was actually $5,000 more.
Okay, and so you're kind of saying, let me start again. If you do that and you're kind of pitting all the colleges against each other to figure out, okay, who's going to give you the best deal?
Yep.
When that college says, okay, fine, I'll give you the extra 5,000 that you were looking for, are you sort of obligated to say, okay, yes, we'll take it now, or you can now take that and go back to the other, the next school and say the same thing? They gave me an extra 5.
Yeah, you can do that with a multitude of schools. Like I said, I wouldn't do it for 15 schools.
No, we're only looking at 2 or 3.
Yeah, 2 or 3. You can obviously go back to them and say, hey, this is my number one institution. I really want to go to this program, explain a story. Maybe there's a financial situation that arose going through this entire process that you can really take a closer look at. But then just having that information readily available for them and saying, hey, you know what? This is what I'm looking to target. Here's how we can, what we can kind of afford and swing at this point in time. Any assistance would be helpful in any way, shape, or form. So
yeah,
that would be my advice. It's something that people are always afraid. They think, oh, if I say something bad, they can rescind my application or my acceptance. Once you're accepted, they can't do such thing. And then they're actually, at the end of the day, they're competing against one another because they want your student. So that's something that people don't keep in the back of their mind, and they'll kind of drive themselves crazy about it. But really take a closer look at some of those options as well. If not, then there are student loan options that you can certainly fall into. That would be helpful to kind of close that gap even further.
Yeah. Help me understand the work study program. Tell me more.
So work studies, I don't know about how it works at every university, but the university that I went to, the work study program was basically a job given to me on campus. Worked in the gym, checking people in. I did a few other things, like I helped clean up. I worked on campus, and ultimately they would pay me like minimum wage salary just to have some source of income. Ultimately, that money went back towards spending money, towards books, towards my laptop, and then anything else that I can conjure up in that time that they were allowed, whether it's for one semester or both semesters. I had it for both semesters. You can actually put that back into what your overall cost of your tuition is going to be. So you factor that in as well. It's not traditional, like just a scholarship, which is free money, which is great and everybody loves, but it's certainly an option to have out there. And they have jobs all over campus more often than not that you can apply for these certain type of things if it's part of the financial aid package.
So when there's a dollar amount attached to that, does that mean that they're obligated to find enough work for you during your semester to accumulate that $2,000 or whatever the number is?
Yeah, they'll typically space it out over the course of like a 30-hour work week or a 40-hour work week, probably 30, because they don't want to pay you benefits and all those crazy stuff. But they'll try and figure out over the course of, is it over 2 semesters? Is it over just a year plan or a 1 semester plan? What does that typically look like? So I happened to luck out and I got it over the course of 2 years while I was at my particular institution.
Okay.
So that's always a good resource to have as well. And then just because if you write to these schools and universities and they reject you right away, totally fine. Be graceful about it, of course. You could always ask about other things and other different significant expenses that are going to arise that they could potentially help out with as well, like books or a laptop, something along those lines, where it's not a set dollar amount, or they can give you a stipend towards it. So there's always room for negotiation. You can negotiate anything in life.
Oh, interesting. So you're saying after they say no or yes to whatever, find a way to get those other little incidentals covered also, maybe at a discount or something.
Yeah, you can
Okay.
try. Some institutions are more flexible than others. Like I said,
Right.
Going to Harvard and then saying like, "Hey, I'm the best student ever," and then trying to pitch it that way is not going to be pretty successful. But if you're going to a state university, if you're going to one of these private institutions that just has a high dollar amount, and your student is feasible within that realm, there'll be more willingness on their end to take a look at your financial aid package and say, you know what, this is the student that we want to represent our university.
Okay. All right.
Cool. Yeah, and if you need help on any other facet, throughout the undergraduate process, there's a lot of moving parts. It's very confusing. I've been in the space for a few years now. Always happy to help at any point in time.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Awesome. Well, yeah, no, I even learned a lot there, so that's good. Yeah, that's great. Well, yeah, so just start to wrap up. I mean, um, like I said, one of the core missions of StudentFi is always education. So I hope that we've kind of empowered all of you to just better understand that process. And like I said, to recap, right, it's really a simple 3-step strategy where you look at free money, federal money, private money. And again, that's a very condensed version, but I hope that can just give you some guidance and a framework as you work through paying for the semester and ultimately paying for school. And so we actually did work with Nick and Juno to put together kind of a special offer for people attending the info session, people watching it as a recording, or don't tell anyone, but if you just share the link and info with someone after, they can also get that. So let me share my screen one more time, and I'll just have Nick walk you through that.
Yeah, so basically, we're always going to be available 24/7. You guys can call me on my cell phone, call, text, email, whatever works best for you. If it's not at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, I'll probably be sleeping. And then also additional cash back for people that are going to be looking to like refinance student loans right now, up to $1,200. And then you're automatically all going to be entered to win our scholarship giveaway that we have each and every month. And that's anybody that registers as well over the course of next week here, sort of thing. So always happy to answer any questions, anything that I can assist with in any way, shape, or form. I'll give my contact information to Jackson, and then we'll go from there.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. And yeah, like I said, to get all this, we'll just give you a special link, a specific link to track it. That will be sent in a follow-up email to everyone who signed up. And again, feel free to forward along to friends and family or anyone you think would benefit. But that's going to be it for today. So thanks for watching. Thanks, Nick, for being here. Lori, everyone. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Have a good one.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.